2 months ago, I put together a lengthy expose on the long history of wanky online discourse in the Fire Emblem fandom. It was a lot of work, not gonna lie, but also a lot of fun, and I was happy to read everyone's comments and discover even more discourse horror stories. So I was sitting there, thinking about how I might want to follow up on that idea, and it occurred to me. I brought up Heroes on and off throughout that video, because for the last 6 years, it's been a reliable source of fresh drama every couple of weeks. However, because I'm also an elitist snob and don't consider Heroes to be a quote-unquote real Fire Emblem game, I didn't give it a proper discussion section of its own. That's kind of what I want to do today, but also kind of not. You see, Heroes Discourse is special, because everyone involved knows exactly what we're talking about. This is a predatory gacha game selling us horny chess pieces. Game balance is non-existent. The story never even attempts to make sense or have a point except in small pieces. And waiting around every corner lies just about every flavor of ethically questionable fan service you can possibly imagine if you happen to be a straight man with a more than passing interest in anime waifus. Unlike what you might find when it comes to arguing over certain mainline titles, no one here is under the illusion that there's anything morally redeemable about what we're getting from Heroes. Also, because it's persistently updated and follows well-established patterns for its character releases, it's possible to track the types of units that are likely to generate the most controversy. For the most part, these units appear on the game's special themed banners, content that explicitly pivots around a designated type of fan service, and so sets itself apart from other banners that add in vanilla versions of characters, or one of like 10 different shiny premium glow-up versions. It's these seasonal banners that I want to focus on, because by their very nature, they're the ones people talk about the most. There's a little over a dozen or so of them scattered throughout the year, so let's go with a top 5 list. The other nice thing about breaking this down by banners is that it means that we can make predictions about future seasonal units, from now until whenever Heroes finally runs out of ideas for horny original characters and reaches end of service. I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one. Before we get started though, I would ask that if you enjoyed this little breakdown and want to hear me talk more about Fire Emblem, that you would please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. That Discourse video came about as a project for my most recent subscriber milestone, so if you're looking for more big, exhaustive pieces like that, you can show your support by subscribing and looking forward to whatever I've got going on down the line. Now, on to the actual list. Starting us off right at the beginning, we've got the very first seasonal theme ever introduced, and it has not disappointed. The first spring banner, all the way back in March of 2017, assaulted us with Lucina and Camilla dolled up like Playboy bunnies. Not to mention Xander with that outfit and a giant carrot that immediately makes me think of, something I'm not going to relate here. It was plain to everyone that Heroes was not playing around. If you thought Awakening and Fates could get ridiculous and horny, well then, abandon dignity, all ye who enter here. Later seasonals would only continue to shock further, but the spring banner kept up with the best of them over the years. 2018 gave us our first special Kagero, whose bust size expands with every new alt. It also subtly kicked off this banner's secondary theme of featuring characters from Macedon. But as the years went on, a slightly different angle began to take shape alongside the setting focus. To put it in stark terms, female character fan service in Heroes can be divided into 2 broad categories: the more explicitly sexual units with enormous cleavage, and little girls. Gradually, the headlining units in bunny outfits for spring began to lean more towards this second designation. And even when they weren't the lead units, there were still plenty of girls in bunny ears and flower crowns to pull here. Obviously, there are some people who are into that, but that hasn't stopped fans from being upset. That was even more the case in 2023, where a noticeably youthful-looking Bernadetta was cast in that role. That's a whole other conversation surrounding her presentation in her own games, but the point is, the Spring Banner has more than lived up to its initial reputation as a harbinger of wank to come. What's more, IS has now stuck all of the White Wings and all of the Mastodon Royals in bunny outfits, so next year they're either going to have to come up with a new theme to loosely justify the Spring Banner's existence beyond easy fetish bait, or just roll with it from here on out. Honestly, the second option would be even funnier than the first. Here it is, the undisputed king of the seasonals, at least in terms of quantity. There have been 2 summer banners every year since Heroes launched, totaling a staggering 14 of them to date. Anecdotal wisdom suggests that these are consistently among the best performing of Heroes events, hence why we get a double dose of them every June and July. There's a basic logic to that point too. Beach episodes were a theme lifted directly out of Awakening's popular, if occasionally controversial, fan service, and sticking characters in swimsuits is a surefire way to let them show off as much skin as is possible in a Nintendo-licensed game. And oh, did IS deliver! It's just that the exact content of what they've delivered has been rather conspicuously targeted. To start, despite being the biggest seasonal theme in the year, several games, namely Echoes and the Yggdrasil duology, have never received summer units. Instead, the beach banners are flooded with scantily clad heroes OCs, sacred stones for no apparent reason, and 3 houses, making this the first time I'm going to have to bring up the subject of Fodlan fatigue in this video. Since 2020, houses units have filled entire summer banners multiple times, and even this past year they've claimed half a banner, including the headlining duo unit. It's getting to the point where Fodlan just doesn't have any big-ticket options for swimsuit fan service left anymore. Unless they want to dip into the cutesy little girl angle, which Summer only rarely does. Also, while it's not a complaint unique to the beach banners, they're probably the best illustration of how Heroes' approach to fan service has never been remotely equal opportunity. Of the 66 units that have appeared in these events, only a third of them have been male. And if you count the backpack characters separately, that drops to below 30%. And male units aren't just lacking in numbers. While the women on these banners most often get tiny swimsuits that show off all their assets to the fullest extent that the game's rating will allow, the majority of the guys here get stuck wearing baggy board shorts that leave plenty to the imagination. Good luck finding any nipples here, and if you're desperate for some real fan service, Lauren's in a Speedo is about as good as it gets. Never mind why it's Lawrence of all people who got this honor, or that he wasn't even on his associated banner but came in as a Tempest trial reward. Why does he have Ken doll anatomy? Shockingly, the summer banners do occasionally generate complaints about the kind of fan service they like to put on display. Whether that's because a character might be underage, or because all the female characters have slender limbs and smooth skin and large busts. But, come on guys, it's the summer banner. What else could you possibly expect? These things are peak IS tastelessness. I'm just waiting for the day when they have to resort to tossing Yggdrasil characters on here so that they too can enjoy the same kind of shameless exploitation as the rest of the series roster. Fallen banners are rather unusual. Although they're intended to showcase a certain theme, they aren't classified as special banners, but rather take up a new hero slot. For the first few years, the Fallen banners didn't make too many waves. The ideas they were pulling from were mostly limited to instances of corruption in the mainline games, or concepts taken from hypotheticals explored in cipher cards. That's still largely the case today, but in 2021, 3 houses entered the Fallen arena, and the banner just hasn't been the same since. Fallen Edelgard was one of those overtuned nightmares that wreak havoc on the metagame, and was followed by over half a year of premium units specifically designed to counter her. The Hegemon was equally unpopular among fans and critics of her character, being both yet another symptom of Fogland fatigue, as well as a representation of her monstrous final boss form from Azure Moon. It didn't help either that the same banner added Fallen Dimitri, who, rather than succumbing to any form of corruption, is just suffering from the same mental illness that he does in canon, only now with purple graphical effects. We'll be getting back to IS's notorious laziness when it comes to Fogland characters a bit later. The two most recent Fallen banners haven't been much better, as while they haven't released any notably broken units, they've also given us Fallen Rhea and a Sothis-possessed Fallen Byleth, each of which has generated plenty of wank following the same lines as Discourse over their respective characters in their own games. Well, Discourse over Sothis, anyway. Byleth barely even has a character to argue over. While most players won't be happy to learn that their fave is evil in one continuity or another, prior to the Fallen Houses characters, that wasn't much of a concern for this banner. There's a certain coolness factor in getting to see concepts like Berserk Ike and Risen Crom brought to life in the mobile game. But because talking about FE16 online inevitably devolves into arguing over who's the most justified and least morally gray character and faction, this is what we're stuck with. Fallen Shez possessed by Arval is a safe bet for next year too, so it's unlikely we're out of the woods yet here. So because Claude's the only lead Fogland character to not get a Fallen alt, and doesn't even have a solid basis for one in canon, does that mean he's actually the best? Or does it just mean the developers cared about him the least? I am not touching that argument. The annual Choose Your Legends polls are hotbeds of controversy all on their own, ranging from frequent accusations of botting to all manner of conspiracies to push some characters up and others down. Some voters will throw everything they have into the year's top picks to win, while others, like myself, will spend their whole ballot on an obscure fave simply in the hopes that IS will use the overall results to gauge the popularity of units when they've decided who to add into the game. But when August rolls around and we get to see what our prizes are, there's plenty of new stuff to be argued over. On a broader gameplay level, Brave heroes are often more susceptible to power creep than other premium units, because they're easier to obtain. That's sketchy enough, considering these are the only units expressly chosen by the players, but the individual Brave banners have produced wank all on their own. Choose Your Legends 4 was swept by 3 houses, but the Brave unit designs were all copied directly from the game itself. We didn't know it at the time, but this would become a recurring issue with premium Fogland characters, and another indicator that those games were expressly designed with the gotcha in mind. That's not to say that IS was only lazy with their designs either. There's plenty of Brave units that are just wearing their promoted outfits, or borrowing the look of a related character like Erica wearing her brother's outfit, or, probably most notoriously, adult Tiki wearing the same clothes as her younger self. The meme winners from the voting haven't fared very well either, with Gatekeeper being odd but underwhelming in both concept and execution, and Golveg going with just about the safest design concept possible. I suppose they're saving up her hardcore fanservice looks for future alts. If Engage sweeps next year's polls as predicted, it wouldn't be a stretch to expect that the winners' designs will be just their promoted looks, or something equally uninspired. That's the paradox of Choose Your Legends. IS wants to give players an opportunity to pick their own units, but they can't make the winners too appealing or too exclusive lest they cheapen the value of the units and banners that they profit more from pushing. Maybe now you get why I vote the way I do. Nothing says waifu game like sticking all your favorite female characters in wedding dresses. It's not surprising in the slightest that bridal banners would stir up all sorts of discourse. The idea already felt kind of sleazy and pointless when Awakening's DLC did it to Erica, and that tradition has been kept alive for a decade courtesy of Heroes and its annual showing of nuptial-themed banners. In a sense, brides have taken the role one might logically have expected the game's Valentine's event to occupy instead, drawing in all the potential vitriol surrounding shipping and marrying characters, while the so-called Day of Devotion gets to play around with dead dad themes and tease gay Crabbin and Fates Royals pairings instead. It's kind of impressive how little people argue over that one, frankly. Brides are the other, older half of the 1-2 punch of discourse that is the month of May in Heroes, alongside the Fallen banner. We've got all the usual staples on display here. Characters are reduced to objects of player desire, because ignoring the handful of already married exceptions, it's intentionally never clear who exactly these people are acting like they're getting married to, leaving the door wide open to the faceless self-insert they talk to through the screen. Like just about every other seasonal, bridal banners are disproportionately female, to go after the target demographic of straight male gotcha whales. The event ignites shipping drama and accusations of shilling certain games, like for example when Binding Blade took over the banner for 2 years in a row, filled out with Roy's harem of potential wives. If the ships being suggested are themselves controversial, such as Micaiah and Soth, then that's a whole other matter entirely. And then there was Bridal Sanaki, who showed up in 2018 and went over very poorly, between some critics flat out calling her a child bride, and others saying that she's obviously a flower girl and that if you see her as a bride, then clearly you're the dirty pervert and part of the problem. I find this whole situation comparable to certain pact ring conversations in Engage. Even if the dialogue allows for plausible deniability, the implication is still there, and there's definitely a market for that sort of thing. IS, in their usual fashion, hasn't shied away from courting even more controversy, because in 2023 we got harmonic adult Tiki paired with her younger self, which inflamed the child bride arguments all over again, and also prodded at players who were still sore about what had happened with Brave Tiki, and with the developer's perceived bias toward her child version. And yes, this just so happens to be the only category on this list that hasn't yet featured any Fodlan characters. But it's only a matter of time, and heaven help us when IS unleashes that upon us. I've already seen enough houses shipping discourse to last a lifetime, thank you very much. So that's going to wrap it up for my list of Wanky Heroes banner themes. Are there any banners that I didn't talk about today that created a bunch of discourse? What about banners that got on your nerves specifically for whatever reason? Tell me all about it in the comments, and be sure to like the video and subscribe for more Fire Emblem content of all sorts. Au revoir!